So for me, it really is about pursuit. And not just of the fish, but of self. There's plenty of times that I go out that I don't catch anything, but I do come out a better person. It takes so much focus that the whole everything else you have in life goes away. Like all of there is you in the next 14 hours of doing the same thing over and over. It's just as much about, character development for who I want to be as I age than it is about the fish. So yeah, my name is Eli Hendrickson. I grew up like fishing in California in my early days. That's kind of where I got the bug for it. Then we moved to Tennessee, and the bass there are just amazing. So, I mean, my entire life, since that time I was about 4 years old anyway, I've been fishing consistently at least once a week, all over the U.S. I held permits in 7 states last year. I used to have permits in Oklahoma City for the city, Oklahoma State, like all over. But yeah, lately here I've been really getting into fly fishing in Colorado quite a bit, and some of the border states as well, planning trips for it, and so that's kind of the new transcendental point for me.
Yeah, and I know you've used that before. You've used that term before. Fly fishing is kind of your transcendence of fishing, and I kind of want to understand that. So, what are the different types of fishing, and why do you consider fly fishing the peak of it?
Well, yeah, fly fishing is really alien, but for me, like when you're targeting a particular species in a particular body of water, after a long enough time, I mean, there's a way and another way to do all of this. There's no the way to do anything, but I mean, you get it all dialed down. Like, if I'm fishing like a pond that's covered in like grass and all this, like a bunch of garbage and stumps and things in the water, I'm going to get a 7 foot medium heavy action rod. I'm going to use 30-pound braid, pick out a few frogs, and then I know exactly what patterns I'm going to use based on the how hot it is outside, what time of year it is. Like it is challenging in some respect that trying to pursue a new body of water or whatever. But I mean, in all reality, there's just nothing hard about it anymore. Like you know exactly how you're going to go about doing all of it. So fly fishing is a whole different animal. You're not just using whatever shape that a fish's brain perceives as a prey item. Like you're actually matching like a bug in a particular like phase of its life, like for a time of year, for a body of water, and how you present that. It's all completely alien.
You said a lot there that just kind of got me spinning a bit. So maybe we can start with the basics just for my own education. What types of fishing are there? I know there's reel. I know you can do like carp shooting, which is kind of unique. Ice fishing, which is just a form of reel fishing.
Yeah.
Fly fishing. Like, what else am I missing from here? Harpooning?
Well, yeah, spear fishing, dynamite, the obviously illegal ones.
Right.
But yeah, I kind of the way I break it up really is just in two categories essentially. There's the lazy type where you're sitting on the beach in a chair, or you're sitting on the back of a boat for 6 days, like I was in South Dakota on the Missouri River last year. You don't do much. The bowl kind of bends over a little bit and you got a fish, or you just drank beer all day and you don't have a fish. Like, and then there's the really active types where you're actually pursuing something. You're moving around quite a bit. You're reading like cover and conditions, and you're actually pursuing the fish versus letting it come to you. So that's kind of how I would break it up. Is like there's the lazy and the active type. You do find people that tend towards one or the other.
Yeah, and I guess I don't have a lot of fishing experience, but I've done two charters. One was in Alaska, and we went halibut fishing, and that was very cool. But
The Canadian dream.
it was very much handheld, right? You go out on the boat, you're having beers with your buddies. Um, you just kind of like plop it in the little hole, and then
Yeah,
you guys halibut.
it's
And
the right place at the right time.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it was good. It was a blast. We caught like an octopus. We caught a bunch of blackfish. It was very cool. Like I could see why people do that, and it was a great way to kind of. It was a great thing to do with the groom before he got married that week. And it was also awesome. Little side tangent. The we were on the Kenai River, which, if you know anything about, is a very famous river in in Alaska, and I kid you not, the house that we were staying on, you could walk out to the Kenai River, and it was just like a nonstop line of salmon swimming upstream to go in lay eggs. And we didn't have any of the. I think salmon at that point, when they're going to reproduce, they don't care. So like you could put water or bait in there, whatever you want, and they're just so determined to get upstream, go lay their eggs and die, that they will not bite on anything.
Yeah.
Uh, we did end up catching stuff, but it was us like, snagging or hooking the fish, which is illegal. But we caught enough and cooked up some salmon right there along with the halibut that we made, and that was really cool. But that's to your point, a lazy style of fishing. And I think that you're telling us that you tend to side with the active side of fishing,
Oh
right?
yeah, very much so. Like I guess passive would be a more fair way to put it. Like it's more, the passive and active would probably be the more fair way. And for me, a lot of it just has almost like spiritual, like, connection, mastery of self, like understanding, like commitment and pursuit. And you just can't do all of those things sitting down. You can know where to go and all that, and you just hang out all day. You let your mind wander. But, when it comes to actually improving like who you are in terms of what you pursue, it's a great avenue for growth and development. And you've got to cover a lot of water to get there.
Can you maybe tell us about what goes into like a fishing weekend? Like, how do you find the spots? What's the trek out there? Are you going with a group of people? Like, I kind of just want to understand how deep you're going into, or how active you actually are to get to these cool spots.
Yeah. So we started with the gold medal streams is what we did in Colorado. There's supposed to be the best access for public that you can get to fishing. There's a whole lot of water in Colorado that is just private property. There's just no access to it. And Tennessee's laws, and almost everywhere I've ever been, you can't own water. So as long as you stay in the water and you don't like ingress onto someone's property, it's not trespassing. In Colorado, the river bottom somehow is the property of whoever owns it. So
Hmm.
you can't breach that boundary whatsoever. And so, yeah, we start with the gold medal streams like the Blue River, the South Platte. And, in the fishing guide, we would just cross them off with a highlighter every time we would hit every single stretch of every gold medal stream. And beyond that, we use Onyx because my brother's a really big hunter. So, like during the winter and the fall, like he kind of takes over and he's like, this is what we do. This is the rounds we're bringing, this and that. The whole rest of the year, I'm like, all right, we're buying these flies or these lures. And yeah, we use Onyx a lot of times. We plot a route because I like to have as much like GPRS type data for where I'm going as possible, like inclines and all that, so I can plan my time targets. Like, how long do I want to spend in one spot? And about how long is it going to take me to cover that? And what are the challenges in between? And so I factor all of these things in along with exhaustion and whatever. Like my brother, when he first moved here, he was here for a week. Like he hadn't even really climatized or whatever. And he went fishing with me. And I took him on a 16-mile hike through boulders, and his Apple Watch said that we climbed 100 ladders in that because of how much elevation we were gaining and losing. Just having him go up like really steep embankments, walk for a while, and then go right back down.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah,
So
and those things are like ovens too, so it's brutal, but it's like that type 2 fun you referenced earlier.
there we go. So you're kind of you're finding the spots driving out there. Are you just are you camping out there? Are you parking on the side of the road? And
I do have some of those planned out, and I've done a lot of that before in different capacities. Done almost like glamping, where there's a generator, and I get to sleep in a nice camper that's air conditioned. And then there's been lots of times where, like as a teenager, I would do 100 or 200 miles to go on the river, and we would pick sandbars. Um, you do a little more planning about rise of water and all of it. We'd pick sandbars like 75 miles, 150 miles, whatever it is, and then that's where we would camp out. And we would drag all the dry wood that piles up on one side to the other side that we parked the boats on, and we would just burn that wood and fish all night long.
man, I feel like you're enlightening me on this like whole different style of fishing. Uh, is it a matter of just kind of parking, getting out on the hike, and finding, at least in Colorado, because you said there's like property issues, but is it just a matter of finding or hiking out to those access points on the river that you want to hit up?
Yeah, I mean, the best fish are usually in places that people just don't want to go. And I mean, for me too, to see those kind of things, it's wild. A lot of times, I'll be sticking to the side of a cliff or something someplace, and just wondering how many people I know would ever in their life have the chance to experience something that fulfilling, like to push themselves to such a point that they're really off the rails. Like something happens, you're kind of done. Like it's really not an easy way out.
Right.
And
And
I've been bit by snakes like this before too, like copperheads. Emergencies do happen out there.
man, and another thing that comes to mind is, and this is probably a silly question, but as someone who's not a fisher, like going to spots where nobody is, I mean, you're still not guaranteed to find anything, but the
No.
chances of finding something is probably far greater because you're not competing with the other lines. But like,
Yeah.
I guess, what are you looking for when you're picking different areas of the river, or is it literally just a matter of I want to touch this entire river and see as
Yeah.
much as I possibly can?
That really is what it is. Like, I mean, there's so many river systems, so many stretches of water that I mean, in your lifetime you'll never be able to hit even a tiny percentage of them. So for me, it really is about pursuit. And not just of the fish, but of self. There's plenty of times that I go out that I don't catch anything, but I do come out a better person. Whether I mean, it takes so much focus that the whole everything else you have in life goes away. Like all of there is you in the next 14 hours of doing the same thing over and over. You know, so for me, like it's just as much about character development for who I want to be as I age than it is about the fish. But it is just as much about the fish. Like my brother would try to tell me, "Oh, at least we had a great day," and I'm like, "Yeah, but there is no fish. Like I can't ignore that."
I
Many
feel that.
many times, I've got skunked more times fly fish. I've caught fish fly fishing probably 12 times, and I've been about 500.
Sounds like you got to change something up. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we
Uh,
didn't know where to go. Like we didn't know what we were doing or what to throw, or we were scaring them all off, or we'd hook one and we just didn't know how to handle that.
yeah, because I have to imagine yeah, I just don't know enough about fly fishing. Like, maybe you can kind of 101 it for me. If you find the river bend and then, you're not just casting your line out and reeling it in and repeating, like
No,
fly
there's a lot
fishing,
of
you're
different kinds of casts. So you have that traditional, like a river runs through it type stuff, where it's the forward cast and then the back cast. But a lot of what you do in practice actually are like roll casts, where you just kind of like bring the rod up to you and let the line weight fall and then fling it forward. Because ordinarily in any other in spin casting or those types of fishing, what you do is you just add a bunch of weight to the end of the rod, and then like
mhm.
F equals ma, it loads up, it unloads, and there it goes. Well, we're throwing bugs that you almost can't see. Like the wind blows just a little bit and it's flown out of your hand and it's gone forever. You could drop it in the dirt and like there's zero chance of ever recovering it. They're so small.
Hmm.
And they're not cheap either. I mean, it's probably the most expensive hobby I have aside from vinyl. Oh, but yeah, so there's a whole different system. Normally with the spin casting, we just kind of use like 10 or 20 pound line, and really good knots, like pretty solid stuff to where, I mean, you could play your cards wrong and still land a fish. These trout are really, really aggressive fighters. And like you're using like at the most maybe 5.5 pound test on a really long rod. So like the fish turns its head one time and you're not prepared for it, like it's over with. It shakes the hook or it snaps the line. I mean, the line is so thin because their vision is so good, and the waters are really, really clear where you find trout.
Is that kind of is that the main thing that you're fishing out there is trout?
Yeah, and it's really a question of availability. There are some bass, but like a lot of people do like bass fishing in the winter. I won't do it because it's like hooking a stump. There's no fight to it. Like it's exhausted, it's frozen. Like you just tow it in. You're like, whoa, cool, big fish. And then that's sort of it. And you might get two a day like that. And it's like that's when we switch to hunting or like Call of Duty. Like, but there are some people that will fish year round.
Okay. Yeah, where was I going to go with this? Oh, you mentioned like, so I assumed that you could only fly fish certain fish, but it sounds like you can fly
Oh,
fish.
yeah, anything. They make all different kinds of rods. Like, what I run now is a 9'5" weight, which is pretty normal for most sizes that you would find out here. But, I mean, there are some, like, 14-foot rods, and, like, they make fly rods and all these different variations. They make saltwater ones with, reels the size of dinner plates that people really send out there. They pursue every species of fish there is. There's people like, we've looked at doing it in Brazil for peacock bass.
So what's the if you compare real fishing versus fly fishing, if you can catch any fish with either, like what is the perks or why would you choose one over the other? Is it just the fun of it, like just being more active versus
Yeah. Well,
inactive?
with trout, I mean, yeah, the active is way more active. I did not realize how much exercise is. I was sore in places I didn't realize you could be sore. Um, but the uh the trout, they do prefer their natural like forage, and they're
Mhm.
looking for specific bugs to come out at a specific time of year the same way. Even time of day, like an insect can change appearance and you have to match the fly to that. So it is way different from a standpoint of complexity. So it can be more effective, but really it's just the challenge of it. Like there's almost no room for error. Like you can do everything wrong with spin casting and still catch fish, but you can do everything right fly fishing and still not get anything. Like, it's
And I,
just a little bit more intimate, I think.
yeah, I could see that, and I you can still do reel casting in like a moving river. Like I would have to imagine that you can only really fly fish on a quick river
Yeah,
because
most of the time I prefer to go upstream and then bring the lure or the fly back down to me. Like, that's how I really kind of got the idea for trout fishing from smallmouth bass because they behave really, really similarly and they hang out in the same kind of areas. But what I would do is I'd use like a half-ounce spinnerbait, which is something that nobody really did on my favorite stretch of river for this in the U.S. And yeah, I just throw a half-ounce spinnerbait upstream and then let it kind of load up in the current, and they would just slam it. I'd be getting between 4 and 6 pound smallmouth consistently every week. Like enough that it was
okay.
just wearing my wrist out. Like I felt like I was gonna get carpal tunnel. I was catching so many fish.
So you went into fly fishing, so you could catch less and not worry about that carpal tunnel. I got it. I got
Yeah, okay. I never thought about that. You're right. I'm saving my health here, man.
it. Coming back to what you said about it being more complex and challenging, like you said that you're still going out fishing and having a good time, even if you're not catching much.
Yeah.
I went on an elk hunt. I've only done one so far, and it was like 7 days. Me and I think it was seven of us, and then we would just like go out in pairs and go hunt for the day. We saw, you know, 3 or 4 moose, probably 3 or 4 elk, a bunch of mule deer. Did not get anything, but I definitely left that trip smiling, and I still talk about it because same deal. You're hiking around, you're working yourself, and it's just like it's blissful. You're kind of seeing the world in a way that no one's seeing it, and
And you're colder
roughing
than you
it.
thought you would tolerate.
Oh yeah, there were some cold mornings. Every morning, one
Why
of
am
the
I
guys would
doing
just,
this?
"What's that?"
You're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, you had to convince yourself to get out of bed in the morning because that's why you drove out there.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't really care where we take it from here. I kinda want to go into the whole like finding yourself spirituality portion of it because I think that's very common amongst the type 2 fun crowd, right? They like to push themselves. They like to direct their energy, their thoughts, their whatever, their strength into something, and like often you go through all that suffering or that challenge and kind of puts the world into perspective. But I want to understand like what fly fishing is for you with that.
Yeah, I mean, they say that the easiest way to become a millionaire from fishing is to start out as a billionaire. But yeah, I think the spiritual component for it really started developing in my teenage years. Like I used to go to kind of get away from like school stress and all that, the teenage angst kind of thing. Like, and I would go, every day of the week because I was lucky enough to grow up mostly about 3 blocks from a dam, and it was
Okay.
a really, really good one. So I got to see about 20 years of how like the ecosystem changed there. And not only that, it was along the most biodiverse river in North America and the second most biodiverse river in the entire world in terms of flora and fauna. So I mean, there's a lot of times I caught stuff that I never saw ever again. Didn't really even know what it was, or things that just shouldn't have been there. And it's like, whoa, okay. But so as a teenager, I kind of did that as like almost an escape and a pursuit. But where it started really developing when I was about 16, we got the idea. It's like, hey, let's just start camping along these sandbars. Like we know when they're going to release water from the dam, and you know we just decided to try it, and it was just absolutely miserable. Like there were a lot of things that you should know, and no one's going to tell you. We had the Air Force survival guide and all that, as gung ho teenagers do, but um, there's just things you don't really know that you need. And we refined this really, really well over time, but we learned it all like, doing it. So the first mistake we made was realizing that you're going to be extremely tired the next day, and you're going to be, your shoulders are going to be so sore because we had an 18-foot canoe. And we didn't realize also you want to keep that thing as light as possible, because the further down the water is, the more drag it's got. And the Duck River is one of the stillest rivers you can imagine. Where it's fast, it isn't really fast. Right. And it's not going to carry that much mass either, like that. You're basically just a log. So we're working as hard as we possibly can. We do like halfway point the first time at like 50 miles to camp out for the night. So that would come to bite us later on. But yeah, we figured out too, driftwood piles up on the upstream side of the sandbar. So what you do is you park your canoe and stuff on the other side just in case it does rain or something out of nowhere and the water level rises and you have to get out in the middle of the night, right? But that we plan around that. But what you do is you drag all the driftwood from one side to the other. You kind of dig out like a pit, and we just set up camp about 2 hours before dark. And I don't bring a tent either. Like I don't believe in it. Like if I believe in the weather enough to do it, like I'm just sleeping on the rocks right next to the river if I do pass out. Got my French press going and all that. But then we fished that whole thing around there all night. And then we realized the next day, yeah, our shoulders are on fire and all this. We're sunburnt pretty good. And we left half the trip for the next day. So, I mean, there's plenty of times too where there's some fast current and I would throw into one pocket or whatever and pull a bass out of nowhere. Like it was super cool. Like, but at one point we're eating dry ramen with one hand and paddling with the other. So trying to meet this time target.
Oh
So I
man.
think that's where it started developing for me, is realizing that there was a world completely accessible to all of us, like that just requires effort. And then as time went on, at that age, you think you're going to find yourself around people that want to do things like this, that want to grow in that kind of way, and you don't. And so more and more, I started finding myself by myself, and the last thing in the world I want is someone to complain about how hot and tired and all that they are. That's why I have such strict canoe criteria. Like I'm not getting in a boat with you unless I know that you're going to deal with it. Because I mean, I'm hot and tired too. I really don't want to hear it. So it started really developing around that, and then I started to realize like who I was becoming because of going out there, and like I brought more of myself back with me than I came with. And yeah, that active kind of pursuit, refining who I was, the technique that I was going to use, how much I wanted to invest into getting as much as possible out of anything, really, because it carries over to many aspects of life in that way too. I guess that's why I became kind of spiritual. It's like realizing that you have to be the best person you possibly can be, no matter how much everything hurts or whatever, because of that vision in front of you, what you're after. And you do achieve it. You see it, it's confirmed every river bend you go around, like, oh yeah, I'm doing it.
I feel like you summarized that so well, and I see that commonality with a lot of the guests that I have on, because there's no like reward for doing a lot of this, but you get to go on these wild adventures, see the world in a different way, challenge yourself, and just kind of you know see what you're capable of. And like you're using fishing as a means to do that. It's kind of the activity that allows you to do all this. And it
Yeah,
is
it's
interesting, like
kind of a vehicle,
yeah, there's a lot of people I have on that they use their vehicle or their hobby as a means to see the world. Like they will um, they will go across like over to Europe to do a canoe marathon, or they will try to see the world through the different marathons they want to run, or try to hit all these bike packing trails. And I just think that's so cool. And that might be another reason that I didn't even think about of why I started this, is because, yeah, you look around the people that you hang out with in the world, and a lot of them aren't willing to go through those tough things. And so, like you said, it's kind of isolating. You end up by yourself because you can't find anybody to who wants to waste their weekend
Yeah,
uh,
and it doesn't
doing that.
photograph well. I mean, you can take all the pictures you want, but, like, unless it's you in the water out there, stuck to the side of a cliff or whatever, I mean, like, there's just you're not breathing it when you see it in a picture. It's just there's no translating the experience. Like, either you're
Yeah.
there for it or you're not.
And if you do get a photo that's gorgeous, it's not the same as if it was in
No,
person.
like, there's just something about feeling it's a very visceral experience.
You were kind of describing that experience of sleeping on the sandbar, and I like that. I liked how you described that. You just go through this like treacherous, not treacherous, but this long canoe ride with all your gear. You find a spot to park, and it sounds like you set up your home base right on the sandbar, and you can just take a few steps out in any direction and be fishing right then and there.
Yeah, and in Tennessee, it is different because a sandbar is a temporary part of the river. Like, that river, every time it floods, and it will flood quite often because it's a semi-tropical climate. All the sandbars and stuff. I mean, there's a few ones that you could consider semi-permanent, but really, the entire structure of the river changes. Like, all the deep spots or whatever, where the woods piled up, things like that. So legally, it's considered nobody's property. And so, as long as we packed out all our trash and we were respectful and all that, we could build a fire right there in whatever county we were in or whatever. And we're on no one's property. We're doing no damage to anything, you know? So it's like a sustainable practice thing and legal compliance, which makes it a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, you don't have to tiptoe around anything.
Yeah. And plus, I mean, there is some comfort in knowing that, like, whatever's in the woods has to go through the river to get to you. And most stuff isn't that determined if there's a fire there too.
Yeah, I didn't
A
even
little
think
bit of
about
peace of
that.
mind there. It's
Yeah.
dark out there at night. Like, there's no anything. No light pollution.
I have a bunch of experience with Kentucky because I used to live there, and I know
Oh
that
yeah.
they're bordering, so they're probably similar climates.
Kentucky's got some good bass.
Yeah, like, are all the rivers there? They probably have like massive like cliff faces that the river runs through, so you don't really have a lot of options to pull off on the side and camp there, and that's probably why you choose
No,
these.
you gotta go by
Okay,
boat. Yeah. Or
and
by
like you talked about these dam releases. I know that there's some places that they do whitewater rafting based on the dam schedule. So
yeah, and in Tennessee, like, the Great Ocoee is a good example. It's class 4 plus rapids, and that is a lot of fun. There's a couple good outfits out there.
for
Can't
the
really go wrong. And, I mean, but there's canoe services too, like, there are campgrounds that will drop you off at one point and pick you up. We learned to do this on our own because, I mean, that's like a 4 or an 8-mile trek, like, and then there's kids in the water and stuff, and it's like, yeah, but also no.
you're ruining my nature.
Yeah, you're ruining my nature, exactly. I'd rather be as far away from them as I can get.
So for the listeners, if you don't know, you can go to some rivers and whitewater raft, but a lot of them they only time it based on the dam schedule. So the dam will open up at certain periods of time, and they actually share that schedule with the outfitters that do the whitewater rafting. So they know a day ahead that they're gonna open up the dam at noon, 1, 2, 3, whatever, and they schedule their times around that. So you get to the river and you're kind of just sitting there. It's kind of lame, and then you look upstream and they just had opened up the dam, and you see the fun coming at you. It sounds like when you're doing fishing, you're kind of using that dam schedule, whether you know it or not, to kind of move fish towards you. What does that like? What does that look like? I guess why does having the quicker water matter for the fish?
Some
Versus,
fish like faster water, like smallmouth and trout really love fast water, especially smallmouth. The fastest water you can possibly find is probably going to have the biggest smallmouth in it. Like they're different from normal bass and like or largemouth, I guess I should say. Like largemouth bass, they love cover. They'll hold right to it, and they kind of like if there's a big tree down the water, they're kind of right on it. Smallmouth bass are like these super fast predators, and river smallmouth are significantly stronger than lake smallmouth. They I think they're the hardest fighting freshwater fish by pound there is. Like a
really.
5 pound smallmouth feels like a 14-pound largemouth, like easy. And they jump out of the water. I've seen these things while wading the river. I've seen these things jump out of the water onto shore, like chasing after minnows, and then hop back in the water after the fact. Like but so really what it is water depth. You know, the deeper the water is, the more of like the terrain features along the shore that become the
Mhm.
cover that they're able to hold to. And so they kind of like end up where they're going to end up like catfish, if it's warm or whatever, they'll kind of top feed some of them, but mostly they're on the bottom. Carp are kind of in the shallow runs that are really wide along the river most of the time. Like it kind of like just gives them more real estate to play with, and they all kind of filter in their groups to where they want to be.
So they're probably sitting there dormant, but once the water's opened and the depth changes for however long, then they have more freedom to play around. They're
Yeah,
moving
and
around
in
a
a
bit.
river, I mean, the moving water is the food system, like, that's what brings it to them. It's like a conveyor belt.
Huh.
So they position themselves, according to, like, the whatever strategy their species uses to optimize, that conveyor belt of food to them. And we just sort of exploit that a little bit by, targeting those particular areas with baits the way that we do to try to get stuff, so
That's really cool. And this is all kind of how you did things in Tennessee. So now you're not really using a boat. You can't kayak through the
No, and the
mountains or
water is
anything.
so shallow, there's no way, man. Like, I don't care what you weigh, you're gonna get hung up, like, every step of the way on the waterways here. I mean, the Arkansas and the Rio Grande, maybe, like, you'd be alright for most of it, except for all the low head dams, like but, yeah, no, it's way different. You're emulating it in a way. You're still traversing miles and miles of river, but you're doing it on foot. And like, it's not what you would think. Like the waders themselves, when you get in the water, like, hey, you really don't want to be more than like waist deep, because if it gets past that into your chest area, it'll start filling that thing full of water. And that water is so cold, like stinging cold, and wherever trout are usually. But the air pressure from the outside starts crushing like your body. So like if you forgot to cut your big toenail or something, you're gonna be miserable. Like it's a lot of pressure that crushes you from the outside, and then like just the force of trying to stand there, like all those muscles, hold yourself rigid, and to move around in that. Like, oh my goodness, it's a workout.
And why is you said that you're staying put in Colorado. Is it
Yeah,
just the fact that they have so many rivers? Because what you described in Tennessee sounded pretty awesome, but I
it
guess
is
what's
pretty
the draw
awesome.
to Colorado?
Yeah, the Colorado trout are just something else. Like,
Okay.
yeah, and then, like, you've got all these, like, piercing blue skies and, like, the clouds that roll through really
Mm.
low and herds of antelope, and, like, it's pretty neat. Like, it really does feel like you're out west. Like, the Dream Stream is one of my favorites here. It's a 4-mile stretch of Gold River or Gold Medal River, the South Platte, and, the whole thing is just, like, serpentine, like, picturesque, wonderful. Like, you're in between 2 mountains, and there's, like, you're in the valley in between them. They have, like, all these antelope that roam through there. Like, feels incredibly western, and the trout are enormous.
That's great. That's a gorgeous picture that you just painted.
Yeah.
What do you have on your docket? Do you have any like big trips planned, or is there any dream fishing things that you want to do anywhere in the world?
Yeah, my brother and I have been planning a trip to Brazil to go for peacock bass. Like, they have different packages for it, but we're kinda looking at the one where they're, like, medium size, not necessarily trophies, but you get, like, over 100 a day. Like, basically, you fly in, and then you take, like, a little puddle jumper to where you start out, and they have a bunch of boats they have chained together that just float down the river, and you spend, like, a week out there, like, doing nothing but, sleeping and fishing. off of this convoy down the Amazon.
That's cool.
So
That would
that's
be
pretty,
more.
and it's
That'd
only
be
like 5 grand. Like
okay.
it's real doable.
That would be kind of a guided experience, but obviously such a unique thing, and you're in it for, what'd you say, five
Yeah,
days?
that one's gonna be lazy, but I mean, you gotta mix some of those in. Like, I don't hate on it. I just acknowledge you're not really gonna grow from it as much as you want as a sportsman. Maybe as a person though. So there's always a time and place for that. Catfishing or whatever. Where you want to sit down and meditate for 14 hours, you can do that.
I
But
think
yeah,
if you're anywhere in nature for 5 days, sitting or being active, you're gonna kind of learn a little bit about yourself.
oh yeah. I mean, we're wired for it. And then I've got a really good friend in Tonsberg, Norway, so I'm looking at pursuing some salmon out there for the next year. I've
Have you
been
done a
looking at,
lot of Have you done a lot of salmon?
no, not yet. I haven't actually. I fished for salmon on the Columbia River in Washington last year, and then I was shark fishing in New Jersey the next week. But yeah, no, I haven't really gone after many. It was just there, and the Columbia is huge, and those flows are so fast. Like it was challenging to figure out how to access it. like, uh, that's some big water. In Tennessee, we have a couple of rivers like that, but not that flow nearly as fast as the Columbia.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance to get up to Alaska, just seeing the salmon migration was kind of mind blowing. Like, I kid
Yeah,
you
I'm
not, you
looking right
stare in
now.
there, you
I'm
stare
gonna
there, and you
uh,
just see a line just nonstop. It just doesn't seem like, where are they coming from?
yeah,
Um, it was very cool.
I'm actually looking
Uh,
right now, getting a place in Anchorage for that reason.
Maybe after
Yes.
this call, I'll tell you a little bit about Alaska. That was a very cool experience.
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting something that's like 700 square feet in Anchorage so that I can like prepare for and recover from expeditions.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, so I always try to leave time at the end of the episode to just allow the guests to kind of tell any stories. I mean, you told that one about how you got into it and the lessons you learned in Tennessee, but is there any
Oh, for
other
sure.
type 2 fun stories that come to mind? Maybe ones that you learned some hard lessons on?
I think if you're looking for type 2 fun, I think if we're talking about spiritual experiences, like the most interesting to me was, and probably the most transformative to me was, there's a 4 mile stretch of river in a place called Readyville, Tennessee, called the East Fork of the Stones River. And I have the whole thing, the whole course memorized, like for every turn or whatever, where it gets deep and shallow. Because the river bed there is way different. Like no matter what it floods to or whatever, it doesn't really change. One side might get a little deeper or whatever, but like the topology is pretty similar. And I'd been out there fishing this like when I first started Compass, like every weekend or whatever. But it was mid October, 2022, uh, or 2021, yeah. And the water temperature had gotten to like 53 degrees. And normally I brought my bag with me with all my stuff, but I really perfected this art where I had like this 30-pound braid. I used like a 9-foot leader, and like this 7-foot ugly stick I was running with, 6-to-1 gear ratio, so it came back really, really fast. Like I'd really perfected this art. But this one day, like it was just started raining like crazy. And I get in the water, and the water is just frigid, and it's getting colder and colder. But like the for some reason, the way it had disturbed the surface of the water, like as I'm wading the stretch of water, I am just slamming like 2 and 3 pound smallmouth. And normally I can do this run, fairly quickly, but as I'm going, the water level is really rising like bad, and it's cold. And I started at like, I don't know, 12 in the afternoon. So, dark is approaching pretty quick. But I mean, I'm just numb as numb can be, and like frozen. And I'm battling like this flooded water has presented problems to me where I'm like having to climb over trees and things that I normally wouldn't have had to, like that I couldn't even see. Like, I mean, I'm tending closer and closer to the bank, but like I caught 100 smallmouth on this stretch of river, and for some reason, like I didn't bring my bag or anything. I tied one knot, one lure on, like, and this is a leader that I've tied with a line to line knot, right? So I don't know. I just believed in it. Like that was the day, and for some reason, like one spinner bait, like no gear, no phone, no nothing. Like I waited this whole 4 mile stretch and caught 100 smallmouth. And by the time I got out, the water was like up to my chest where it should have been at my knees. Like the flows were going, and I'm kind of like bouncing up and just letting the water carry me further along and perching in a spot and casting into the current and just nailing them left and right. Like I could not believe it. But yeah, coming back from that one, like frozen, like solid, like I don't know. I think that one transformed me the most out of any run that I've ever done.
What do you do? Like, do you take any of those fish home, or is it just
Almost
about?
never, especially not
Okay.
in Colorado, because like now the pond ones, like the stocked lakes or stocking schedules you can see and all that, those fish are a renewable resource that I pay for with my tax dollars. So yeah,
Hmm.
and they're dumb as a stump. Like they eat everything. Like they're not really, their fins get underdeveloped when they grow. Like they're just not right. And so yeah, I eat those. But any of the wild fish that I catch, 99% go back. Like because I want those opportunities for the next sportsman. I'm very like conservation minded when it comes to like the sustainability of this practice. So like everything I can do to make sure that what I return back to the water is in about the same condition I got it, I do. Like, cause I just believe in like that access and that opportunity for whoever wants to pursue it in the future. I'm not going to last that long, but it's going to be around as long as people are around. You know, and all it takes is a few selfish people right now to ruin it for another generation or two. Like most of the money we put into conservation doesn't show up on the rivers either, you know. The same as our tax dollars in the roadways, you know. A raise in taxes doesn't mean a smoother ride to work. Like it's the same way. Like fishing licenses go up every year, but you know, Colorado is one of the only states that I see actual improvement from that money put into the system.
Hmm.
So I
That
try to
that
do my part there.
Yeah, I would assume that you would have had like a little cooler or something, at least take a few back every time. But that adds a whole nother level of, you know, determination or pride for the sport.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is about maintaining those populations, the quality of the waterways. Like it's very perishable. All it takes is like some of us to just ignore all the laws and do whatever we want, and we ruin it for everybody, including ourselves. Like there might be a honeymoon period where things are going well, but like the impact on the ecosystem is going to be immediately apparent. And it may not even be recoverable. It may take crazy efforts and lots of years and money, and people even know that it's a problem and care enough to do something about it to fix it. So, you know, it's yeah, you have to be really be mindful of what you're doing out there, I think.
Yeah, the same goes with hunting. I mean, in Michigan, or all around the world, right?
Yeah.
They kind of like change the rules of that year. The DNR is constantly looking at the population, seeing what they want to wean out, seeing what they want to maintain. Um, I feel like this year you were allowed to get like 6 doe in certain counties or something because there's just a lot of doe, so they're fine with people taking more and
Yeah,
thinning
it's
it
kinda
out
like
a
the
little bit.
markets, you know, you may have unusual environmental conditions that produce results that deviate strongly from all predictions, and now you got people running over deer left and right. Like, that's the thing
Yeah,
with hunting is they're gonna die no matter what. So,
yeah.
I mean, to put that to
I
good use and to have money put into, you know, conserving it, like, yeah, it's kinda
actually
wonderful.
just I actually just picked up a roadkill deer the other day. I have to go and I skinned it. It's sitting in my garage. I got to quarter that thing up, and there's some free back straps and venison that would have otherwise probably got thrown in the ditch and eaten by a coyote.
Yeah.
But uh, yeah. So is there anything else that's on your mind with all this? I feel like we covered quite a bit, and I'm pretty happy with the direction this took.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it too. Like, I usually don't talk about it because it's hard for me to stop. But yeah, I guess if you were talking about what the differences with fly fishing, like I've got all of that stuff kind of down. Like, there's just only so much to know. You know, after a while, you figure out your rhythm, like what works for you, what kind of gear you buy. Like, I mostly buy ugly sticks. You know, I think like transcending ourselves, like self transcendence, is more important than self actualization as far as like, you know, our journey as people. And for me, like I actualize pretty easily with the spin casting, but to transcend like myself and to pursue something that I'm just not good at, like I'm not good at fly fishing. I love it. I've hooked myself way more times in the past 2 years than I have in the past 20. Like, I've hooked myself in the face, like, you name it. Like, they're small hooks, but they're sharp, man. And so, yeah, I mean, pursuing something I'm just absolutely terrible at that I care enough about to get into, like, I think that's what it's about. It's like, who do I want to be? I'm kind of tired of easy. I mean, it doesn't sound easy, getting beat up and getting cactuses in you and bitten by snakes and all this heat stroke and, all the muscle problems and all that. Yeah, like that's easy, at this point. I need something that actually pushes me to something else, to see things I haven't seen before. And the entomology end of it, understanding insects and those different phases of life, geographically, that is a crazy topic that I am not good at all. Like, there's a lot of headroom here, and I just don't really have it anymore in spin casting. So
That makes sense. It's a lot of that progression thing. I mean, I think that's a thing that draws me to a lot of stuff. Is I try to get into things that I can always progress at. Once you master something, it almost like loses the fun even.
yeah,
Like, I don't know. I felt like I've done that with podcasts I listen to. I used to grind on these Bitcoin podcasts, and now I'm like, all right, they're repeating the same thing over and over. Let's like switch it up a little bit. And same with this. I get to learn about stuff that I didn't even know about, and I just think that's really cool. Having that obsession with learning and progressing
yeah.
whatever you're working on.
That's the problem with the growth mindset, is there really is no final plateau.
Yeah. But you're always pushing your body, you're pushing yourself, and trying to find what your limits are. And
Trying to find a whole different area of things that I didn't know.
That's great. I think this is a good place to tie it up. Is there any like final thoughts or shout outs that you want to give to the listeners?
No, I just really appreciate you having me on, Tyler. Like, it's a great opportunity, and I had a lot of fun with this one.
I love it. Glad to hear, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Type 2 Fun podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a follow and feel free to reach out to say hello, give feedback, or share your Type 2 Fun story.